Oh, I'm still a robot?
But there's so many bodies on the floor.
In a Western world with cars.
Where's my daughter? I'm still looking for her, even in this next season.
I'm back to talking like I'm a host.
I've got a gun pointed at you.
What am I looking at? Doesn't look like anything at all.
I'm still in this series.
This is a song that I recognize. Is that Nirvana?
Yes, it's heart-shaped box, and that means it is go, 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 go!
Welcome to Cordkillers. Our mission to report the intel from the front lines of the cord-cutting revolution so that you can watch the stuff you love when you want, where you want, on whatever device you want. I'm Tom Merritt.
Hey, I'm Brian Brushwood, and that most certainly was definitely the actual audio from the new Westworld Season 2 trailer that we just listened to.
Yep. Not a reenactment by me, Brian, and our guest, Jason Howell.
Hello, how's it going? Should I spoil the surprise and let you know that I've never seen a single minute of Westworld, though I intend to someday?
Yes, but whatever you do, don't spoil the surprise that we forgot to have an opening video queued up, and so we just reenacted a trailer.
That's ridiculous.
I would never do that.
Okay, good.
Why would you even say that, Brian?
Dude, I'm so glad you're able to join us, Jason. How you been, man?
Been good, busy as ever. Got a lot of things going on right now. That's just life. Life on the internet, right? It just keeps happening day after day, every day on the internet.
Yeah. Well, we're very happy to have you, Jason, and we are very happy to start talking about our primary target.
Nice.
So, the BBC released its second annual report since establishing its new charter, which states that the industry is more and more dominated by a small number of U.S.-based media giants with extraordinary creative and financial firepower. Talking about Netflix and Amazon here, and that their business models and huge budgets mean we are increasingly being squeezed out of an even more competitive environment. British creativity and British content are now under real threat. The BBC laid out goals for its iPlayer platform to help keep younger audiences. Broadcaster says that for the first time, 15 to 34-year-olds in the UK are listening to streaming music services like Spotify and Apple Music more than BBC Radio. But for this show, I think we want to focus on the TV. And wow, it's very tempting to get into the whole idea of like, oh, it's BBC. It's run by the National Trust. It's government funded. I don't think, Brian, this is really the interesting part to me. I mean, that's an interesting conversation, but you can have that any day of the week. I think what the BBC is struggling with here, and maybe they don't even realize it, is the same thing that NBC, ABC, CBS, everybody is, which is, holy crap, Netflix and Amazon run their streaming service, own their content, produce their content themselves. We're stuck with all these old deals. I mean, the BBC's sitting on a jackpot of content that they can't use in their own streaming service because they've already agreed to let somebody else use it.
Yeah. Okay. So what's interesting is this is a bit of a familiar power play that we've seen before. This struggle between various networks and people trying to dominate an emerging space. This is all a song we've heard. However, I will say, I know you're trying to steer me away from it, but I do find it interesting that there is a genuine nationalist element to this. There is like the significant part is this is a state actor that in its statement is like, certain American companies are dominating everything. And, we've obviously had a lot of friends of ours up in Canada join us on the program, and Canada does stuff like regulate that I think 30% of all content that they go on broadcast networks has to be created by Canadians for Canadians in Canada. And the I don't know. I know you want to wrestle me away from the obvious hot button topic here, but I do think it's very interesting.
I think that's a cold button. That's the only reason I'm saying it. I think that button has been sitting there for a long time. Looks good on a 1970s shirt, but that ain't the button that's interesting. The button that's interesting is actually, I think, highlighted by what you just said. The BBC is doing its normal thing of like, but we are the BBC and very British, and it's these Americans, but it's all because of the same thing. And the same thing isn't because it's American. The same thing is because Netflix and Amazon are entirely disrupting everybody's business model. Whether your business model was being a national broadcaster for the UK or your business model was being an open market advertising supported national broadcast network in the United States, they're all getting thrown to the curb by this, and they're tied up. And this is where you're right, the song we played before. They're all tied up by the fact that they made deals for an old world that suddenly doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I guess, Jason, what's your read on this? Because I guess to me, it is significant that the disruptors to the party are no longer disrupting the other players at the party, but entire people who decide and craft their own what should be protected marketplaces, and then they can't anymore.
I think for me, what sticks out like a sore thumb, and I think it's kind of tying on to what you were saying, Tom, is just the insane amount of budgets that companies like Netflix and Amazon, but I mean, I'm more of a Netflix guy, so I'm way more familiar with the amount, just the sheer amount of content that Netflix puts out on seemingly a daily basis, and the fact that they have the money and the budget behind it to be able to power their service with not only lots of content, but high quality content. If the BBC is lacking in funds, like the fact that they're touting that their iPlayer has a recommendations engine probably isn't going to do a whole lot. What BBC obviously needs in this case to compete with players like Netflix and Amazon is a heck of a lot more money than they're getting right now. And to put that into high quality content, I don't know how you survive in the current phase of where we're at with this stuff without that. And it seems like that's just what is interesting
about the BBC is it was Netflix before Netflix by government law, right? Like it's a subscription service. You pay the government a certain amount of money, and the BBC makes its products. It also makes money off selling some DVDs, licensing its products worldwide. We have BBC America. That's one example of that. But also BBC programs end up on Netflix through licensing deals. They end up on Sci-Fi Network, on PBS. So the BBC was Netflix before Netflix, right? Like they have it built in. They're even better than Netflix because in the United States, we can choose, and in the UK even too, you can choose not to pay for Netflix. In the UK, you can't choose not to pay for the BBC. But the problem is they're hemmed in because they don't get subscriptions from outside the UK, and the UK base is not enough to compete on a global landscape with the Netflixes and the Amazons of the world.
So is this possibly, if we were going to extrapolate a lesson for this, is the lesson to be as vertical as you can, create your own vertical from content all the way, and keep in mind, this is not, we've talked about this on the show, but the modern Rogue is sort of built on a vertical stuff where it's like we make our own products, we try to sell our own products, we have articles that encourage you to support on Patreon and buy products, and then we like is it a good idea? Is it a superior platform, or is Netflix an anomaly that just happens to be in the right place at the right time with what ultimately may be not the best or not a scalable business configuration?
That's a great question. I just want to take a moment for the pedants in the audience. I just glibly said in the UK, you can't choose not to subscribe. Yes, I know you can show that you don't have a television and not pay the television license fee. There is a way out. I'm speaking metaphorically.
Sure.
Almost no one does that, right? And so, okay, you have a choice, but it's not the same as Netflix, right? For the purposes of this argument, it's an entirely different situation. And I think you ask the question. Amazon has a version of this. Hulu has a version of this that is region restricted. Hulu's trying to do it just inside the United States, and that may be one of the problems for them going forward is they can't grow past the United States where Netflix and Amazon can. But is there a point where that ends up being a problem for Netflix and Amazon? Right now, it doesn't look like it is. Jason, do you have a take?
Well, I guess my question on this is how difficult is it to get the majority, if not all, of BBC content in the U.S.? Mind you, we aren't subscribing to the BBC in the same way that Brits or whoever are living in the area where they're paying the tax are getting it they're getting it anyways. Over here, like what are the options other than these licensing options? And I guess apparently the question is that enough? I've never heard of BritBox. I've never heard of Acorn. I don't know how big of a player those are. But if we were able to subscribe, would that actually move the needle at all for the BBC in this regard? I'm not sure that it would. I'm not sure that it would.
My glib answer to you, Jason, was going to be, it's easy. You just get BritBox and Acorn and PBS and Sci-Fi and BBC America and a few other networks, and then you get everything that's available from the BBC. Yeah, BritBox is the one that the BBC is actually involved directly in.
Right.
But they still can't put everything they have there because some of it they don't own. Some of it was something where they contracted it for production, put it on the air on BBC, and now the production company owns it. Some of it is licensed out to other players, some of the players that I just mentioned, like Acorn, et cetera.
But even if they were able to put everything there, would that solve any of these problems? Would that actually be a solution here where they'd be like, oh, great, we've nipped that one in the bud?
I mean, that would be extraordinarily difficult for them to pull off, but I think they have to. I think that's what they have to do is worldwide have a BBC service that keeps as many BBC things as possible. They are a worldwide brand. People know them. It would be very difficult for them to throw PBS under the bus, to undermine BBC America with a service like that. That's one of the things that's keeping them from doing it, I suspect. But if you said to the world, you can get everything we have for X dollars a month, just like Netflix, they wouldn't be as popular as Netflix, but they would be way more popular than a lot of other services.
They would at least carve out a station, a smaller one that they feel like they deserve, but they would have a place in the new world. Because you're right. The problem is that they're completely vertical in their own market, right? Where it's like everyone has to pay for our service. We're the distribution. We own everything. And that's the way it's going to be. For the outside world, it seemed like there was a hot, few decades where they're like, well, this is gravy money. Yeah, sure. We'll take pennies on the dollar for Doctor Who because, we don't ever plan to release it or try to get a distributorship foothold in North America, South America, and Asia or whatever. And so they did. And now that lack of foresight and vision is biting them in the butts because I don't know how they get that back. My guess is they're too invested in this. They're too diversified. So in that regard, I think you're right. I think they just do their best to claim back as much as they can, as fast as they can, and try to make a virtual distributorship worldwide.
And they're constrained because I'm talking about PBS because we're in the U.S. What about the Australian broadcasters that they have deals with? What about the South African broadcasters they have deals with? And the list goes on.
Well, and
that they would have to figure out.
I mean, how long does the other side of the coin have in all this? I mean, it's like, are we consolidating to a place where everything is all verticals, and then finally we have aggregators of vertical subscriptions?
Seems to be the way it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would think,
and
so much
CBS,
overlap.
They all have
we're
the same
paying for that
issue,
overlap.
right? NBC gives their shows to different networks in Australia. If NBC wants to be a worldwide service like Netflix, they would also have to go back and renegotiate these. And Beatmaster points out in the chat room, like, Netflix and Amazon even have these issues, and they are new. And they have some shows that are like, oh, well, we can't show those in all our markets, even though we can show most of our stuff in all our markets.
So what's your recommendation on their play then, Tom?
Give up. Just go.
No, that can't ever happen.
There's no way.
I mean, we've had a great thing going, but you know what? It's just not worth it anymore.
It's tough because even the iPlayer, which is their UK based player for UK citizens, only has a 30-day catch up because they don't always own all the rights. So I would say you've really got to start with the new productions and say, okay, from here on out, every production we do, we get worldwide rights. We get, eternal rights to put it on the iPlayer in the UK.
You know what?
We get the right to decide where to put it worldwide so that if we want to create a worldwide iPlayer, we can do that.
You know what this feels like to me is the old adage, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today. And it's like, bad news, guys. You got a bunch of bad deals, and you have leveraged yourself. You sold off opportunity for hard cash over the last time, and you want that opportunity back. We don't have a time machine. You can't fix it on all that stuff. All those old deals have to expire, or you have to have enough capital that you could buy back the remaining years or whatever to get it all back under your umbrella. But start today. Start today. Get to work, people.
Yeah. Very, very. I like the tree metaphor quite a lot.
I wrote that myself, and then I used a time machine to send it back to before I was born.
All right. Well, we got an email here from Norm in Visalia, home of the Oaks, who says, "Hello, all. Started watching The Expanse last week and was thinking, I wonder what Brian Tom thought of it. And then wondered how the Patreon reward level was to break up spoiler in time shows for individual shows. I didn't see anything on your Patreon page, but maybe I missed it. Brian, where are we at?"
I'll tell you what, right now we are just under 1,500 patrons, but we're just under $1,600, which puts us a scant. We're under $300 away per episode from being able to completely enact the Spoiler in Time project, where we take not only the content from this program, from this iteration of the show, but all the way to the 4 years previous that you and I were doing Frame Rate over at another network whose name escapes me. And and we can arrange all of that so that you can experience all of that content along with us.
Do it now. If you're not supporting the show, you'll help us get to that goal and get some bonus content we'll mention later in the show. It's patreon.com/Cordkillers. Do it now. We'll wait.
Brian, I think I know which place you're talking about.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Anyway, just thought.
Okay. All right. Well, remind me later.
We'll figure that out in a minute. Now it's time for How to Watch. Got a twofer for you in How to Watch this week. First of all, the Tableau Dual Lite, the latest version of the Tableau DVR with a dual tuner, hence the dual, is a new version that's $140 instead of $220. So the Tableau Dual, which has the dual tuner, is $220. The Tableau Dual Lite is $140 because it doesn't come with the built-in storage. That's going back to Tableau's roots. Tableau launched as a device where you added your own storage. They're doing it for two reasons. One is they know some people like that flexibility, like to be able to save money and use a drive they already have. But Tableau is also introducing a cloud DVR service with 40 gigabytes of online storage. Now, right now it's in beta, so you can get to use it for free during the testing, but it'll eventually be a paid service.
This seems kind of diabolical. Like, it's on the one hand, I don't like going back to shifting the storage situation to the consumer. I think in general, people want, especially in something like the Tableau that is ostensibly an all-in-one box, they like it to be all-in-one. But if you can get somebody to buy it and say it's pretty much all-in-one for now, for while it's free, just use the cloud thing, it'll be fine. Don't think about it. Or if you want to save money, let me put it this way. As a consumer, I don't like this. This feels like a little bait and switch. But as when I put on my Tableau hat, I think this is a brilliant move that's really, really smart, that is going to be very lucrative for them.
Maybe I'm missing the dual, like the other layer that you're talking about, Brian. But I feel like offering a stripped down version, bring your own drive, get basically the same thing, is pro consumer. Like that's an option, right? You don't have twice as much money to plunk down. You already have a drive. That's a great option, but maybe there's something more diabolical.
What the difference was I bought a Tableau for this show and never used it because I got it home and was like, I have to go get a drive. Oh, that's the thing I'll get around to doing, right. And then never did. And then I gave it to Zach, and then Zach was like, oh, this is great. I got a drive, and I plugged in the Jeep Drop to the Cleep Clop, and it's awesome. And I was just like, that's not what I want. I've got children. And then and then they're like, now the drive's included. I'm like, smart. That's it. You plug it in and it goes. And then it's like, no, we're going back to that. Only for and this is the diabolical part, is for the Zachs of the world, who want to save the most money and have the most options. They could do it that way. Meanwhile, the dads of the world, the Bryans, are going to buy this thing. They're going to plug it in. It's like, congratulations, you bought a thing that does not work unless you subscribe to this totally free cloud service. And then 5 months from now, we tell you it costs $20 a month or whatever. Well, that's the part I worry about.
but you don't have to buy the one without the drive, right? I mean, that argument made perfect sense to me before they had the one with the drive. But
Correct.
Now you have the option. So the only thing that would be anti-consumer is if they were confusing about it. And to me, as long as they're upfront, like, you'll need a drive if you buy this one. If you want one with the drive built in, buy our other one, then that's okay.
Yeah. We'll just see. I mean, my guess is my guess is they did not release this to relinquish to giant pressure. There were not people with signs outside of Tableau saying, "We want one without a drive. We want less. We want less."
Okay, sure. But that's not the only reason to put out a product.
Sure.
What I think they're doing is super smart, which is, hey, we've got the one with the built-in drive. We know there are people who like the option of bringing their own drive. They're like, look, I already got a drive, right? They're the Zacks of the world. So we've got that one out. And eventually that one will also become a cheaper one for people who don't have drives because of cloud storage. Now, granted, cloud DVR isn't there yet, but we can get some folks to test us. I don't see anything wrong with this.
I'm not passing moral judgment so much as just
you got a bait and switch.
What are you doing, Brian? Huh? Why are you being such a jerk?
I think this is a very savvy decision on Tableau's that does not appeal to my needs. How about that?
Well, then don't buy either one of them. I guess that's the answer to that. Hulu added the CW to its live TV service if you live in Philadelphia, San Francisco, Atlanta, Tampa, Detroit, Seattle, Sacramento, or Pittsburgh. So one of the four of us gets to benefit from it. That they do say more markets will follow. CBS strategy with CW, CBS owns CW, has been interesting. They took all their shows off Hulu, right? And their shows are available on YouTube TV on demand, but not on a live stream. And it's available in some markets on DirecTV, apparently, on DirecTV Now. But mostly they've been driving people to the CW app. That app doesn't let you get away from commercials and only shows you the past 5 episodes. So this, because Hulu has a DVR, would seemingly be a way to watch and record the CW shows that you otherwise would have a Tableau to get and do it over the air.
Dude, yet again, Hulu climbing back from the brink of insanity, just getting better and better, that service.
I really got nothing on CW. It's a network. It's probably one of the few networks that I don't know. I've just never really taken the content on there seriously. But it's strange that CBS is being so selective with this particular live feed. I guess I don't understand why they're doing that.
It's a demographic push. They're thinking, okay, we have a younger audience with the CW, Riverdale, Supergirl, Vampire Diaries. They're not going to pay for a commercial-free service like Hulu. We want to keep more of the money, so we got a cord cutter option where we try to drive people to continue to watch it regularly because the shows will go away, and we now have limited live TV services if you agree to our restrictions. My guess is there's going to be some restrictions about that Hulu DVR that show up that are going to annoy the crap out of me. Because Hulu DVR, unlike the PlayStation Vue DVR, doesn't make it easy to find the DVR version. A lot of times it'll just give you the on-demand version, which doesn't let you fast forward through commercials, which is super annoying. All right, let's talk about what to watch in Under Surveillance.
Not like real estate. It's all about location.
Under Surveillance.
Just a reminder, there's no news about this, but Legion returning to FX April 3rd. That's tomorrow as we're recording this, so maybe today as you're listening to it.
I'll tell you what, man, I got news for it everywhere I go. I'm seeing on sports channels like like I'm at the restaurant and they've got sports ball on all the monitors. All of a sudden I'm like, wait, is that I think that's Legion. So it seems like they're doing a pretty heavy marketing push.
The advertisements are Legion. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I meant to say.
They played this trailer in front of Ready Player One. I keep seeing this in the movie theaters, this trailer.
Really?
Yeah.
How about that?
Speaking of sports, ESPN announced its standalone streaming service. ESPN Plus will launch on April 12th. If you recall, it's a $5 a month service, includes live sports not carried on the ESPN cable channels. It will occasionally have an MLB game, an NHL game, also Major League Soccer, a bunch of college sports, boxing, PGA golf, tennis, and more. I imagine that these they probably have just enough of these to be able to say it without being fraud. Most of the sports on there are lesser known sports because that's what they can't fit onto the main channels. But this will be available in the regular ESPN app. You don't have to get a separate app for it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it makes sense to me. Like, if you're a fan of an esoteric sport, let's say
cricket, or cricket, maybe curling, esoteric to us,
darts,
Canadian Football League,
bowling, or whatever. It's like, my guess is
beer pong.
If you love it that much, then $5 a month, it's like, yeah, I'll sign up for that just to watch. This guy I met once at a Shakey's, who's now bowling.
I imagine they'll probably get a lot of people to do this because maybe their team in Major League Baseball or soccer or hockey is playing. They'll see the option to watch that game. They'll click on it and they'll like, oh, this one's on ESPN Plus. Would you like to give us $5 a month to watch it? And people are like, oh, sure. And then they end up watching their friend from Shakey's and doing bowling because they didn't realize they also got that. This guy
gets it right on.
Handmaid's Tale returns April 25th. The new trailer is out that is deceptively hopeful for Handmaid's Tale trailer, to be honest.
I think that is going to be the smart move that they're going to make. I really hope the second season is a lot more inspiring. And really focuses on sticking it to the man, by which I mean literal men.
Jason, did you watch Handmaid's Tale?
No, you know what? I've got crickets on this one too. I've seen some previews and it looks like seen some of the trailers during the first season. I actually watched the preview for this and realized I'm sorely behind. It looks like a really bleak show, and I used to be so into the bleak thing, and lately I'm trying to watch things that aren't so bleak.
Well, Jason, if it makes you feel better, it's super bleak. So bleak that I wanted to kill myself watching it. And then
that sounds delightful. Sign me up.
Mainly bleak, but sure. Brief moments of delight.
Yeah. Oh, and extra bleak.
Right. Although the very last episode did seem to have a hopeful revolutionary tinge to it. So as we talked about on this show, I'm hoping that they basically pulled a Westworld where they spent the whole first season world building and then ran the pilot on the very last episode.
Speaking of Westworld, as you heard at the beginning of the show, there's a new trailer. The second season begins April 22nd on HBO. I'm actually curious, Brian, did you watch the trailer?
I did because you teased me, and because ultimately my quest to not see Infinity War trailers, met in, it was fruitless anyway. So screw it. I'll watch all the trailers, whatever.
All right. Here's some developing stuff that none of us have seen. Frank Miller and Thomas Wheeler have a comic book coming out called Cursed about the Arthurian legend from the Lady of the Lakes perspective. So Nimue perspective. That's coming out in 2019. The news is they'll simultaneously work on a show based on the book that isn't out yet for Netflix.
Man, in my mind, I just want this whole story to be like, oh, so they're here. Here, have a sword. Okay, now back to Fish. Look at this. Oh, Miss Fish loves Mr. Oh, wait. Oh, Miss Scarlet Fish over here. I can't believe. Wait, they're back? Yeah, no, that's great. Do good. Anyway, back to the fish story.
What?
The lady in the lake.
The lady in the lake.
Like,
right?
She's just in a lake. I would like to believe that she's just sitting there watching fish most of the day, and occasionally people show up, and then she hands them a quest item, and then goes back to fish.
Yeah, it's going to end up being a National Geographic style, the fish of the lakes of Cornwall.
Oh,
Planet Lake.
Nobody. All right, that's all right. Nobody's on board.
No, great.
It's actually going to be a prequel because Nimue has the sword before Arthur. So my guess is we're going to see Nimue showing you how to cut fish, slice them, make some sushi.
Oh my God.
I'd really like to see all that in the Miller style, the Sin City 300 style, just a super slow show of her fishing.
The trout never saw it coming.
Oh my God.
Steven Spielberg is going to create a 4-hour miniseries called Cortez for Amazon based on the life of the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez. Schindler's List's writer is going to write it based on a screenplay written by Dalton Trumbo. So Dalton Trumbo wrote a movie based on Cortez before he got blackballed. They're going to take that, expand on it, and turn it into a 4-hour miniseries for Amazon. And Javier Bardem is on board to play Cortez.
He's great.
So Steven Zillian is the writer. who wrote the screenplay for Schindler's List as well. So it's probably not going to be anything but bleak.
Yeah, but then don't worry. When it's not bleak, they'll be all like, "Oh, this fish has a scar on his eye. He's a bad fish."
There are lakes in Mexico.
I'm hopeful for anything that this newcomer Steven Spielberg is doing because of Ready Player One. He's definitely he's got a lot of potential. So I'm hopeful for this.
And finally, Netflix has renewed a bunch of its reality shows. Queer Eye, Dope, Drug Lords, Nailed It, and The Toys That Made Us, all getting second seasons. In fact, Dope's second season premieres April 20th.
Did anybody watch not anybody, I'm sure somebody watched it since it got renewed, but did anybody here watch the Dope series?
No, when Dope was not, that's not a reality show, right? That's the scripted one, the 90s scripted one. Am I right?
No, that's you're thinking of Everything Sucks.
Oh, okay. Then no, I haven't seen it.
Is Dope, but this is
then
also different than the movie.
Then there's
Dope.
also the movie Dope that was about a bunch of kids who love 90s culture.
There we go. That's
right.
That's why my wires got crossed.
And,
Yeah,
and you would think it would be based off of that because Netflix has already made a series based off a movie using the exact same name in Dear White People.
Right. This
Great
Dope,
marketing.
Not Dope. It's not.
Yeah.
This Dope, question mark, not Dope, period.
Yeah, this is not dope in the that's dope sense of the word. This is dope as in the hardcore drugs. I have not seen it. It sounds interesting. Although I will say that Netflix knows my kids because they've renewed Nailed It, and Nailed It is my kids are right now they're obsessed with any like dessert reality TV show because kids love sugar.
Well, I suspect. Well,
the thing.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I'm with you. Nailed It is great, and it was fun discovering my 14-year-old watching Nailed It and loving it. I think my favorite thing about that show is just the positive energy all around, where it's just like, hey, you tried. That's great. Let's high five.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's talk about what we've actually been watching. Let's start with our guest, Jason Howell. What's been filling up your eyeballs?
What's up? Okay, so this Saturday I went and saw this movie that just came out called Ready Player One. I have not read the book. I always meant to. Everybody talked about how great the book was, and I'm not a huge fiction reader. I end up doing lots of nonfiction stuff, so I never really got around to it. But I will say, from my outsider's perspective, I thoroughly enjoyed it. We'll probably talk about it a little bit later, but I had a great time at Ready Player One. So did my wife, and she's even more clueless about that. I want you to know that I was trolling around on Reddit, and somebody said like, "Hey, somebody posted a thing on the treadmill from Ready Player One, the real life one." And I assume that was the segment that you had shot for screensavers. I guess so. I mean, if they said somebody, I mean, I did go down to Mountain View last Friday and got to check out, what is it called? It's called the Infinideck, which is basically the omnidirectional treadmill that you actually see in the movie. They got in touch with the Infinideck folks who had shown it off a couple of years ago at CES as a solution for VR, and ended up working it into the film. So the one you see there is the Infinideck. I got to put on the VR goggles and actually check it out last Friday. And
how fast does it go?
It doesn't go very fast. They didn't have it set up like it's nothing like what you see in the movie, as far as like he just hops on, there's no rail, and he just starts running, really fast. It's nothing like that. I have no doubt that maybe someday it can get there. It has a little bit of a way to go. Like everything has a beginning point. I would say this is a beginning point for that type of technology, but still cool nonetheless that you watch this science fiction movie and you just assume everything you're seeing that seems all futury and stuff doesn't yet exist, and this actually does.
We'll talk about it more in spoiler in time, but it really is shocking how much of Ready Player One is presented as deep, distant future, but also definitely exists right now today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And exists more so than it did when the book came out in 2011.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Right. So Ready Player One, I just started. I'm on episode 2 of Wild Wild Country on Netflix, the documentary that everybody was talking about, I think like a month ago.
I don't know anything about it. What's the story on that one?
It's so basically in the early 80s, there was this Indian, this guru who had this big movement. I can't remember his name, but basically he wanted to create this idyllic city of love and community and sharing. And basically couldn't do that in India, and so they ended up moving this, basically constructing from scratch suddenly this big city of love and community in Antelope, Oregon. And so and I've only, like I said, I'm only on episode 2. Apparently things go totally wrong eventually, but it's so far it's super captivating. It's a little bit of a slow mover, but I like that in documentaries, so I'm really excited for that. People seem very
now called
about
Portland.
Also, Take Your Pills is another documentary on Netflix that is I found very interesting. It's kind of about today's kids who are being prescribed and in many ways overprescribed medication for ADHD, or maybe they don't have ADHD, and just kind of goes into like what's behind the drug. It's an amphetamine, and so like kids are how that's being abused and how it's actually helping people focus. I don't know. It was a fascinating look inside something that I've always been interested by, but really very, very much so lack knowledge on. Love
did
on
it
Netflix is a great series. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask on Take Your Pills. One of the things I love about Netflix or documentaries that show up on Netflix is sometimes they can be entertainingly or wildly imbalanced on one side or the other.
Right.
Does Take Your Pills, do you feel like it gives a fair shake on both sides, or does it become apparent that this is like, no, you guys are really on this one side?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about it. It doesn't feel like it's preaching a certain point of view. From my perspective, it didn't feel like, hey, check out what all these kids are doing and it's wrong. You know what I mean? It was just more like, it actually, now that I think about it, they do provide a somewhat balanced perspective, because there's like a programmer from Silicon Valley who kind of talks about the reasons why he uses it, to kind of keep up with, everybody else that's coding in Silicon Valley, and how grueling that can be if you don't have that hyper focus and everything. Very thought provoking. I'm sure it has an angle on it, but it didn't feel preachy, if that's what you're asking.
Interesting.
And then finally, loved Black Mirror. Obviously, most of my recommendations are from Netflix because that's just what I watch these days. But Black Mirror is just like hands down one of my favorite series of all time. I love anything that they do, and this last season was amazing. And I was bored out of my mind by Electric Dreams. There we go.
All right. The only thing I want to add, because we'll talk about Ready Player One and Counterpart and Deadwood in spoiler in time. I started watching Timeless, which, if you follow Cordkillers, I hated Timeless, the premiere episode. So many people with so many different tastes told me that it was a great series that I finally decided to go back. I couldn't force myself to rewatch episode 1. I still think that the Hindenburg part of that episode is god awful for me. I did not like it. I fast forwarded through most of it just to get to the end and refresh myself to where that story ended. But after about the third episode, the second episode wasn't so bad. The third episode, they started to do some really interesting historical events. They did a take on John F. Kennedy's shared mistress, the Simjiankana, allegedly. They did a thing on Watergate, but they did it from the perspective of the Black Panthers and their relationship to the Watergate break-in. So it started to be less about like obvious historical thing and more about really interesting side stories to historical events with a nice overarching story about a villain who's trying to mess up time and they're trying to figure out why. I'm about 7 episodes in now, and I have to say, I really like Timeless now.
Oh,
totally changed.
Wow, the reversal. You know what? I have one other thing besides everything you mentioned that I watched, but I'm going to let Bryce talk about it in what is on the lookout.
Oh, cool. So HBO, I think it was this past week, premiered a 4.5-hour documentary on Garry Shandling. If you don't know, Garry Shandling was a comedian who passed away very suddenly in 2016. And so his close friend, Judd Apatow, who you might know from the movies, put together this really extensive lifetime retrospective on Garry Shandling from when he was a young boy and traumas that occurred then to the success of his two shows, the Garry Shandling show, or sorry, it's Garry Shandling show, and the Larry Sanders Show. Always get the names mixed up on those. And what he did afterwards, and the creative struggles that he had to try to be funny and successful in Hollywood in a world where he felt like a perfectionist. You kind of get that sense. You saw some of this, right, Brian?
Yeah, dude, loved it. I am 3/4 of the way through it. I have the last half of the second on. Number one, it's a long one, but does not feel that way. Like you go along for the ride, and it's amazing. Like the access that Judd Apatow has to all these diaries, to his family, to all the people who loved and cared about him, and to the footage that they're able to find. You get to see him being really bad at stand-up early on, not good with timing, and very awkward. And you get to see him grow and get to a place where he's so good and such a perfectionist that he keeps walking away from projects the moment they hit their stride. And it's interesting to also simultaneously, there's the character you see on screen of Garry Shandling, and then there's the inner dialogue that you hear through his diaries.
And the diaries end up playing a pretty big role in that you constantly are just seeing snippets and snippets of things he's written and musings and the goals and mantras that he's trying to keep for himself. It's really fantastic. And I think even if you don't know much about Garry Shandling, it does a really good job of
explaining to you after the fact why you should care about him now.
Why he's really important. And the fact of the matter is, if he wanted to, could have had Jay Leno's job and Conan O'Brien's job, and chose to pass on both of those opportunities. And his reasoning is not crazy. He's a creative comedian. It's really fantastic. It's split up into two halves. There's the first 2-hour part and then 2.5 hours in the second part, which makes it a little easier to watch. So those are on HBO Now and HBO Go, and they may be airing on just HBO, possibly. I don't know how they do it with really long stuff like this.
That's a really good question. I only live in HBO Now.
Yeah, but there you go. If you have suggestions, send it in. Where can they send it in, Tom?
If they got something we should be on the lookout for, or anyone should be on the lookout for, email us cordkillers@gmail.com.
There it is.
Now, I am just about 40% of the way to funding Trigor, the sequel to Pilot X. If you are somebody who read Pilot X and you want to know more about his story, or if you're just curious and you want to make sure that I get to continue to write some good science fiction, or at least get better at it, check it out. Inkshares.com/books/Trigor. The whole idea with Inkshares is, if you can get 750 people to pre-order your book, they'll publish it. And they act like a real publisher. They do marketing. They do book promotions. They have professional editors and cover artists. And there will definitely be an audio book of this if it gets published. So please, if it's at all interesting, go check it out and maybe pre-order a copy or two of Trigor. That's Trigor.
Hello, everyone. Brian Brushwood here, noted audiobook fan. Look, I really want to read this book, and no matter how many times Tom sends it to me for free, I will never read it. I need you to subscribe so that they'll make an audiobook, because I really enjoyed the first one quite a bit.
Not now, you guys. Not now. I'm ordering this. So
good.
Please stop talking.
All right, keep going.
All right,
Okay.
sorry. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody. Inkshares.com/books/Trigor. It's time for the front lines.
Front lines.
Hey, did you hear this cord cutting's a thing? A report from the Video Advertising Bureau is the latest to estimate the number of over-the-top only TV viewers. That's one of the industry terms for cord cutters. The number has tripled in the past 5 years to 14.1 million households. Side note, that's more households than Tech TV was in 2000. Just so you know. That's about 11% of the U.S. But that's just people who live without cable. If you count everyone, like the people who have over-the-top services and have cable, 70% of over-the-top subscribers also have cable. So if they're moving one way or another, which way do you think they're going to end up moving? VAB estimates the total number of over-the-top viewers will grow to 198.6 million this year.
We've talked for a while where people are like, no. You don't quit cable and then watch Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime. You just, you're already watching those with cable. You just give up the cable part. MoviePass announced a partnership with Landmark Theaters. Users can use the app for e-tickets, seat selection, and advanced purchases. Expect Landmark showings to be promoted more in the app as well. This is interesting. What do you think the backroom negotiations look like on this kind of thing, where it's like MoviePass says, we've got the people, we've got the bodies. They love the fact that we're buying the movies for free. Now that you've seen the power of what we got, let's say we work out a little partnership here.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is Landmark saying, you mean you could drive a bunch of those people to our theater instead of AMC? This sounds intriguing. Another part of this is Landmark is owned by Mark Cuban. So he may have just called up MoviePass and been like, I love what you're doing to AMC. Let me in, and probably a little bit of both.
And show of hands, MoviePass owners. Anyone?
Bryce is our number one guy over here.
I love it.
All right. I'm more and more intrigued, man. All this news gets me more and more excited. Even though I don't really go to the theater very often, this would get me going more.
And if you have a Landmark near you, they're not kidding about promoting it. So they, when I pull it up to see my theaters, there's a movie theater very close to me, and then there's a movie theater up in Round Rock. And that Round Rock Theater is the only one in town that has the e-ticketing partnership. And so it's always the very top of the list when I go to the app, even though I'm never going to drive 30 minutes to go up there.
Wow.
When I can go nearby. So if you live near Landmark, they will draw a lot of MoviePass people just by that alone.
One of the downsides to me has been the lack of advanced purchases, like not being able to buy it the night before, having to wait and show up. Because here in LA, you get to choose your seat. And so you can't choose your seat until you get there. You're going to have a worse seat selection. Sometimes it's just good to buy it a day in advance. So having a partnership with Landmark, that makes it a much more attractive item. Financial Times says Amazon is considering spending $1 billion. I'm not making a verbal typo. $1 billion on a 3-season deal for Cixin Liu's Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. It's often called the Three Body Problem trilogy because the first of the trilogy is called Three Body Problem, and that book actually won a Hugo Award.
Do I need to read these before this comes out, Tom?
Here, Brian. Oh, right. You only do audiobooks. So I won't.
Could you read it to
that.
Brian right now?
Yeah, just real fast. Just real fast.
Read it out loud.
Just go.
Oh, this one's in Chinese.
Crime, you're
because I
committing a
speak fluent
crime.
Mandarin.
Stop.
Read by Tom Merritt.
No, it's actually a great translation. Ken Liu did the translation. It's really good, and it's a fantastic story that kind of spans the history of China, but also involves aliens. $1 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah,
but
it is.
If Amazon's able to, even just show this in China, I think they'd make their money back probably.
Tom, I'm deeply conflicted on this next story. Hulu has passed on the pilot for Lock and Key, which is a cool thing to realize. The streaming services now pass on pilots. Congratulations, streaming services. Samantha Mathis said it's getting shopped around to Amazon, Netflix, Apple, and everyone now. Tom, I don't know how to feel because, like, on the one hand,
Lock and Key.
I love Lock and Key deeply, and I want there to be more Lock and Key. But if it didn't land, does this mean that maybe it wasn't as good an execution, or I don't know.
Well, people pass on pilots that end up becoming amazing shows, right? People pass on pilots for dumb reasons, for their own reasons, because it just doesn't fit in, whatever. But I do like that Joe Hill, the author of the comic books, still out there saying we did a brilliant pilot episode. Everybody did a great job. I hope you get to see it. So he's not hiding. I'm hoping it's just that Hulu either had a technical reason that was only appropriate to them, or they were just wrong.
Yeah, but if they're just wrong, then that's lose-lose too. Then it's like we'll see it and it'll be like Firefly. We'll be so mad it didn't get picked up, or like Heat Vision and Jack.
In the scenario where Hulu passes and Netflix goes, oh hell yeah, we're doing Lock and Key, then you still get to see it. It still happens, right? You don't lose out at all.
Yeah, I just want it to be good and lots of them. Yeah. Is that so wrong?
No, and I think that's still possible, is what I'm telling you. Hulu is not the arbiter of all taste.
Yeah. What does Hulu know?
Right.
They made 11/22/63.
Google updated its Play Movies and TV app for Android to show which apps are streaming movies or TV shows as an alternative to buying or renting through the Google Play Store. Netflix is not included in the feature, but Netflix apparently has changed its mind about being included in things these days. It's also not available in Apple TV's TV app, which is actually not just Apple TV, it's also iOS. But this is kind of Android's version of that, where they're going to say, hey, whatever you want to see, we'll help you find it.
I like there being more players in this space. I wonder what the heck is with Netflix's play on this. Like, do you think they're looking for a check down the way, or do you think they're waiting to see which platform is established and then they show up late to the party? So they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I was so busy being Netflix, I only just now got here. Were you having a party? Well, congratulations, we exist.
They don't want to give up the customer relationship. All of these deals allow Apple, and probably in this case Google, to say, we'll handle the data. We'll find out what people want. We'll make recommendations. Netflix is like, nope, we do that. You don't get into our data.
The app I use is called Just Watch, and it has Netflix in there for what it's worth. It's hard for me to get excited about it if it's not there, because that is just the platform that I follow these days. But and Amazon Prime Video, that's great, but no Chromecast support in that app, so it's only going to get you so far.
Just Watch just tells you where things are, though.
Yeah,
it's not as integrated.
That's true. You can bring you into the app I believe, but
because I use Just Watch as well. If I'm like, where is that? I just look it up. But what this will do will be like track shows for you as they become available on Hulu and things like that. Which
keep track of how far along you are. You can come back later and it resumes.
I mean, which I guess you can do in side reel as well. There's other ways. It's just when it's integrated into the operating system, it seems to work really well. I'm actually excited to try this on my Android TV. But Jason, you're all about Android. Does this excite you that it would be integrated?
Oh, I think it's better, than what we had. I mean, I use that app a lot, but just primarily to manage the actual Play movies and TV shows that we've bought in the past. So it was kind of interesting to me at first to see it opening up beyond that platform, because I've always just seen that app as driving, sales of Google's content. But it's great to open it up, and I guess it's to Google's, larger effort, which is kind of unifying the world's data and making it easier to manage and navigate through. And to that perspective, great. I also don't really have an Android TV set up at my house right now, so I'm not really using this app in Android TV. It's just pretty much on the phone. So maybe it's a little different in that case.
The EU recently passed legislation requiring services like Netflix to not region block citizens within the EU. In other words, starting Monday, if you have a French account and travel to Germany, you should be able to get your French version of the service. However, the UK, which is leaving the European Union, will lose that ability starting March 29th, 2019.
Yeah, so here in the US, if I have a service that I signed up for in California, and I go to Illinois, I don't suddenly get the Illinois version of Netflix or some weird thing like that, or I get region blocked by Hulu, like, oh, you're outside of California. So this is allowing that to happen in the European Union, which is a different type of entity than the United States, but it's in this respect going to be the same now.
Right on.
All right, let's get to some dispatches from the front. This first email comes from Iowa, which is important because the man's name is Brian. Different Brian. This is Iowa Brian, or as he calls himself, Boss Brian here.
Oh, I thought it was Eyebrow.
And I just wanted to let you in on an informative site I've come across recently for cord cutters or the cord cutting curious. It's streambuzz.net/streaming-services-comparison. Compares the main and a few secondary streaming services with each other, including channel lineup, devices available, local channel availability by market. This is the reason I found the site. And they update almost daily with the help of comments and community. So for those still thinking about making the jump, this could be a helpful updated resource to see if it works with their setup or even what they will need to make the jump. Hope this helps. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, right on. Meanwhile, I love this one. Mike Kepper writes in saying that he is loving the After Talk audio very much. For those of you guys who don't know, we keep talking. We say goodbye, and then the show ends. But if you're a Patreon at patreon.com/Cordkillers, you get to hear us hang out for a good 10 minutes afterwards, just chit-chatting. Sometimes some interesting behind-the-scenes details, a little bit of what's going on in our lives. Please enjoy it. And if you're not a patron, consider becoming one.
Patreon.com/Cordkillers. Thomas, the terrible film critic extraordinaire, was writing in about an interesting thing happening in his apartment complex in central New York where his mother lives. Basically, they have Verizon for ISP and cable, and they've been okay with that. But the apartment complex is switching to Spectrum. And when they said, well, can we keep Verizon? The apartment complex said, sure, but you're still paying for Spectrum because it's the apartment complex's ISP. And then you'll have to pay for Verizon too. He says, my question to you guys is this in any way normal? And how should my mother and I proceed?
Set fire to the building. Just kidding. That's not a real recommendation. Man, what are you going to do? You can't fight City Hall. Well, I mean, you could petition and say this is a bad service. You shouldn't do it. And they'll be like, that's wonderful. Now pay your rent. I don't know that you have any options if your goal is to say, hey, shut up. Don't do that deal with Spectrum because we don't like Spectrum. If your options, if what you're concerned about is like having a good experience watching television the way you want on whatever device you want, well, then you should watch a little show called Cordkillers. But outside of that, I don't see any other plays. Tom?
Yeah, no, it sounds to me like the apartment complex is telling him, hey, this is just part of what we charge. So you're paying for Spectrum. You want to pay more to get Verizon? Go ahead. I think apartment complexes get to do that. Your options are to do that or move, but I could be wrong, especially in New York. So if anybody else out there knows, like, oh, there's this law that you can do where you can write a letter and make sure and protest, because there have been similar things with DirecTV where apartment complexes were trying to keep DirecTV out and laws were passed to say you can't stop an apartment dweller from erecting a satellite dish within their own controlled area. Whatever.
Yeah.
So you might, if there's anything like that he could take advantage, give us an email, cordkillers@gmail.com.
Alex writes in saying, at the beginning of April, I'm going back to my hometown and my grandpa has asked me to help him set up and install a streaming box to get an over-the-top service. We've already gone to Suppose TV and figured out that the channels that he wants and YouTube TV is going to be the best option for him. My question is, should I get him a Roku Ultra? I have two. Or is Apple TV easy enough for a beginner? Most likely I'll have to do some support and I've never had one. I got to tell you, I know my in-laws pretty much understood the Roku the moment they enjoyed it. However, I don't know if you heard, but Apple tends to be pretty good at user design interfaces, even for people who aren't very tech savvy.
Yeah. I don't know. I tend to think the Apple is a little bit easier for people to pick up on, but that's not universally true because the Roku's dead simple, like Brian was saying. It's not like you need a degree. I would probably just go to the stores, and find some demo units and say, which one do you like better?
That's actually the best idea because that's going to be what he responds to instantly. And and to be honest, that sense of agency and control when you're trying to get somebody to move into a new environment, even if you know that they're both functionally identical, him at the very beginning feel like this was his choice to move into this ecosystem might be the most valuable aspect of the whole thing.
Then he can't blame you for it if you suggest something and he absolutely hates it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you guys know of a store that would have one of these devices set up for demoing? Because I know they'll usually have like game consoles and stuff.
Right.
Pretty sure I saw one at Best Buy, but I might be confused. Well, certainly at Best Buy, a lot of those TVs on display have Roku's built into them. At that point.
I've seen them on display. I've seen Apple TV and Roku on display at Best Buy, and I'm pretty sure I've seen Roku on display at Target. I'm not sure about Apple TV though.
Oh, interesting. There you go.
Yeah, and obviously an Apple store will be able to show you Apple TV. So. Finally, Kevin says MoviePass's 9-month cancellation won't stop people from signing up for the summer or award season. Summer blockbusters focus mostly on May, June, and July, leaving you 9 months until the next season. Also, award season can be enjoyed in late February. I love the show. Thank you, Kevin. I think MoviePass put the 9 months on there because they're like, great, if we keep you for 9 months, we're happy.
Yeah. The 9 month is the gap until you can sign up again. It's my guess is they A/B tested enough of these penalty offers that they figured out, this is where we hit the sweet spot of the fewest number of people dropping off.
Yeah. Well, Jason Howell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This is a lot of fun. I remember the earlier iteration of this show, and I had a good time producing that behind the scenes.
Oh my gosh, how weird must it be to be the guest now, just showing up? That's amazing.
No, I really appreciate it, you guys. I love hanging out with you.
We get an email from Jason. We're like, listen, you were a little bit late, Bryce, on the transition, and
couldn't help but notice the audio stuttered on that one transition, but that's okay. We can clean it in post. It's all right.
I don't know if you noticed, there are elements in our rundown left over from the rundown you created for Frame Rate.
Yeah. There are elements of many rundowns since that actually follow a very familiar format.
Yeah.
Hey, when it works,
like the fact that for some reason it says time code 37 for the end of the show. I don't know why that's. I like that.
Who knows? That's all right. I'm not asking.
If folks want to find more of what you're up to, where should they go?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell. You can find the shows that I do at twit.tv. I do all about Android, Tech News Weekly, New Screensavers. I'm hopping all over the place on a lot of the shows. And then if you want to follow my music, yellowgullmusic.com. If you did the Kickstarter, I have good news and bad news. Good news that the CDs are ready and they're ready to ship out. Woo. Bad news is I don't know if that's today, tomorrow, or next week, but I know they're ready, so you'll get them soon. And then after that, it's going to open up to the public probably like a month after it releases to Kickstarter backers. So soon.
Excellent. Yellow Gold, folks. Go check it out. Our website is cordkillers.com. Our email address is cordkillers@gmail.com. And we are live on twitch.tv/Night Attack, which is also carried at diamondclub.tv Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We will cut all your hair or cords next week. Ooh.
Hey guys, Brian and Tom here, and it's just the same old message at the end of the credits, just like always.
That's right, Brian. Nothing new here except your name showing up.
Oh my gosh,
because
I've got a name.
You just supported us on Patreon.
Yeah, all those $5 donors. Look at that. That's your name in pixels. We're gonna make you famous, kid. Put your name in pixels on the
classic
internet.
Names in there, but some of you are new. Some of you aren't there. It's sad. What can they do, Brian?
I mean, they could go to patreon.com/cordkillers and pledge $5 an episode and be one of these amazing people, like this one.
Amazing.
Oh, look at that name right there.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.